Hey everyone, we're just going to give it one more minute. I know we have expecting a few more people to join, so just one more minute. Thanks. We'll go ahead and get started. Hello, my name is Michelle Osborne. I'm with ICF, and I am assisting with the administrative side of the WebEx this morning. I just wanted to go over a couple housekeeping rules. We do ask that you please keep yourself muted throughout the presentation just to help keep background noise at a minimum. We will allow for questions throughout the presentation that Stacy is going to give to you this morning. So she will be at the end of each slide in order to take questions. So please feel free to chime in and take yourself off mute and then put yourself on mute when you are completed with your answering session. If you have any other questions, you can also private message chat me. I am the host. Or if you have any other concerns or issues, you have probably noted when you join the audio that this session is being recorded so that we will be able to provide a link to the recording in a follow-up email along with the slides from today's presentation. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Stacy for the introduction.
Thank you, Michelle. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining. My name is Stacy Noblett. I am part of the ICF team supporting Santa Clara County. And today's webinar will review recommended practices for streamlining the permitting and inspection process for residential and commercial installations of electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Louise Huttinger, who is also on the line with us today, is helping to manage the Driving Net Zero project and has extensive experience in electric vehicle readiness. So she'll be helping out with any questions you might have. With a brief summary of the Driving to Net Zero project, decarbonizing transportation in the Silicon Valley. DNZ is a 2-year project funded through a grant from the Strategic Growth Council. It's a multi-jurisdiction and multi-agency effort. The goal is to deliberately and effectively increase the adoption of zero-emission vehicles throughout Santa Clara County. Is approaching this objective through collaboration and analysis, and this is on the role of the county and municipal governments in deploying EV charging infrastructure. This includes developing a regional EV charging infrastructure siting plan, reviewing the core elements of EV readiness, which includes permitting, codes, and land use, and also considering the adoption of EVs into fleets. I encourage you to take a look at the DNZ website to learn more about the project. In addition, resources we've hosted that include the EV Best Practices Compendium, which will include much of what we'll talk about today and a lot more. The EV Building and Zoning Code Evaluation Recommendations resource reviews existing codes and plans from Santa Clara County and 6 municipalities, making recommendations for potential improvements, and local government EV siting toolkit and reference guide. As Michelle noted, this webinar, those of you joining us today will receive a follow-up email with the recording and the slide deck, and it will be made available to others through the county website at the conclusion of the grant period. So you should receive an email notification when that happens. Much farther, I did want to take a minute to introduce and clarify a few of the terms you've already heard and will hear throughout today's webinar. For the purpose of this project, we'll use the term electric vehicle or EV to describe both the all-electric or battery electric vehicles as well as plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. So you often see the acronyms BEV and PHEV to describe the two sort of subgroups. Of course, PHEVs can run on both electricity and gasoline, and in this table here, just to give you an idea of the all-electric range in terms of mileage for those two different vehicle types. Emission vehicles are a broader category that include EVs as well as hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, for example. The structure used to charge EVs can be referred to as electric vehicle supply equipment, or EVSE, but we'll simplify it for today and just say EV chargers. We'll here kind of gives us a snapshot of three of the different categories of infrastructure referred to as level 1, which is your typical household outlet. Takes a while to charge the vehicle, sort of a trickle charge, and it's often used at the residence, but as well as workplace and fleet applications. Level 2 is also alternating current, but at a higher voltage level, provides a faster charge, and is fairly popular for public charging as well as the three other categories I mentioned. Finally, DC fast, DC for direct current. It's fastest charge of these three at 480 volts, and the primary use for DC fast is public charging. This presentation is going to be level 2 charging. Santa Clara has a large and growing population of those BEVs that get 200 and upwards miles, and they will level 2 chargers at home in order to get sufficient charge overnight. So level 1, as you can imagine, won't get a full charge in sort of the overnight time frame. Municipalities encounter DC fast charging certainly, but the installations are more complex and they leave less opportunity for streamlining and expediting the process. So we wanted to mention them here today, but it won't be a focus of this webinar. Aware California is considered to be a leader when it comes to EVs, and the state has set very ambitious targets for EV adoption. To start, or at least more recently, in 2012, Governor Jerry Brown's executive order B1612 set a goal of having 1.5 million ZEVs, zero emission vehicles, on the road by 2025, and the state's on its way to reaching this goal. As a matter of reference, as of October of last year, there were nearly 340,000 ZEVs sold in California, and that number has certainly grown since then. At the end of the end of January 2018, Governor Brown signed an executive order B4818, which includes the new goal of 5 million vehicles, zero-emission vehicles on the road by 2030. The executive order also includes plans to support the goal financially. Clara plays a significant role in achieving these goals, of course. He is leading the region, and as you can see by the graph shown here, the number of vehicles on the road in the has increased significantly each year since EVs came to market in about 2010. NCF estimates that there will be about 250,000 EVs on the road in Santa Clara by 2025. With all of that context in mind, the goal today is to review recommended practices for streamlining the permitting and inspection process for rental and commercial installations of EV charging infrastructure. And I mentioned the focus here is on the level 2. Begin with a step back to understand how permitting can be a barrier and why it's important to streamline and harmonize practices. And much of the time will be spent on recommended steps that municipal governments can take to simplify the permitting process while keeping a focus, of course, on safety. We'll on specific examples, and even those from jurisdictions on the line today within Santa Clara County. The information that we'll present is intended for municipal permitting staff as well as building code staff, but of course the topic is relevant to a broad audience. In the installation of EV charging infrastructure is obtaining city and county permits and passing inspection. Depending on the type of installation, there are different requirements and fees and timelines. As people purchase or lease EVs, every municipality is going to hear from residents wanting to install chargers at home, particularly because that's where the majority of charging occurs. But there will be a need for EV charging installations at multifamily developments as well as workplace and public charging locations. The electrical work is central to EV charging installations, as you can imagine. So National Electrical Code, or NEC, and California Electrical Code are most applicable here. This webinar will not get into building code specifically, including Cal Green. Those are addressed on a separate webinar presented earlier this week, which will be posted to the DNZ website for those who weren't able to join. The electrical and building codes, with the exception of CalGreen standards, don't explicitly prevent or enable EV charging infrastructure. So that means that municipalities can use the local codes to call the shots. They can exceed CalGreen, but must comply with CalGreen and the California Electrical Code. So this flexibility is great news. It's a good thing, particularly if a city is taking steps to streamline things. Each municipality can determine the permitting requirements and process. So what you find is inconsistency across jurisdictions. The permitting fee itself can be $50 for a single-family residential permit in one town, hundreds of dollars in the next town over. In addition, some municipalities rely on long-standing requirements that may not be appropriate for EV charging infrastructure. So the bottom line is if applying for and obtaining a permit is complicated or one that requires a process that requires a lot of time, fewer stations will be installed, and that's how the permitting is a barrier to increased infrastructure development. Make permitting process easy, affordable, and less time-consuming can help speed the rollout of charging infrastructure and make installations more straightforward. Recognizing the important role of permitting in the deployment of charging infrastructure, California legislators enacted a law in 2015 that requires local governments to streamline the permitting process. This was Assembly Bill AB 1236. Requires communities with populations greater than 200,000 to adopt ordinances that expedite the process by September 30th, 2016. All jurisdictions had a deadline of September 30th of the next year, 2017. The ordinance must include a permitting checklist, and installation projects that meet all requirements on the checklist are eligible for expedited review. City governments have access to existing materials from the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. We've included it here. They also modify the standards based on unique conditions. Into developing streamlined procedures, permitting offices must provide the permitting materials on the government's website and must allow for electronic submission of the application materials online. Templates and examples are adopted at the local level. We move closer to that harmonization between jurisdictions, which is so important. At the time, most cities in Santa Clara have passed streamlined permitting ordinances. For those looking for some help, the California Building Officials website, cabo.org, provides resources and templates, and I'll include that here as well. And one more background note, coming back to that January 2018 executive order I mentioned. It's the goal of 5 million ZEVs by 2030. It also directs state entities to partner with regional and local governments to streamline ZEV infrastructure installations where possible. And most relevant to this group is the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, GOBIZ, will publish a plug charging station development guidebook. They're working on this, and we expect it to be available by late summer 2018. Expected increase in the need for EV charging stations and the state-level streamline requirement, local governments should take a look at their current permitting and inspection processes. Be in great shape and have a little room for improvement, while others can make updates that will go a long way to increase efficiencies. However, municipalities must balance those efforts to simplify permitting inspection with efforts to maintain quality and safety standards. And what we'll do today is review the recommended practices related to permit application and processing, installation, inspection, utility notification, and overall performance metrics. Through several ways that a local agency can encourage EV adoption by making the infrastructure permitting process easy, efficient, and low cost for the applicant. Having a permit application that's specific to EV charging equipment will help to clarify and streamline things. The application may be very similar to an existing 240-volt circuit installation application. Identifying electric vehicle supply equipment, EVSE, or whatever terminology the jurisdiction chooses makes it much easier for applicants to find what they're looking for. In terms of fees, early on, once EVs started appearing on roads, California sort of got a reputation for having the highest average permitting fee in the country. A lot of progress has been made since then, but there's still room for improvement. And as mentioned earlier, those fees can vary widely, even within a jurisdiction, as some cities set fees based on project size or value. Ultimately, each jurisdiction needs to set fees that cover their costs, that include municipal review and inspection, but a goal is to lower EV charging installation costs overall. To reduce the cost of permitting, a recommended target fee for Santa Clara County jurisdictions is somewhere between $75 and $200 per permit, which is a fairly broad range. We did call out recommended costs for non-residential permits here. Those can vary significantly based on the scope of the project. So you can imagine there's a lot of variables, such as the number of units being installed, the extent of the electrical work, whether or not there's trenching, the number of inspections, and so on. Local would also consider creative ways to reduce those fees even further, perhaps by waiving or subsidizing the fees to residents and businesses, and this would be a similar approach to programs that some jurisdictions are using to waive permitting fees for solar photovoltaic installations. Two quick examples. The City of Ensenada provides an energy efficiency permit waiver for residential EV charging applications, and the City of Anaheim waives the cost of the residential building permit, which is about $150. Required to install EV chargers, and that's through the city's EV Charger Permit Fee Waiver Program. In paying for the permit itself, the applicants are also concerned with the cost of their time. That's the time finding and submitting the application and time waiting for the permit to be issued. These are two other opportunities that local governments have to streamline and simplify the process. So in terms of accessibility, permits really should be available both online and over the counter from the permitting desk. It's mentioning that AB 1236 that I referenced before requires that permit materials be posted online and also allow for online submission. Them online has many benefits, including allowing for round-the-clock access as well as online submission and payment, and can free up permitting staff to do other things. Providing a fillable document with an electronic signature option could allow for easier and faster submission as well. Plus, the electronic format can be possibly tracked quite more closely in terms of volume as well as the locations of the installations. A recommended timeline to actually issue that permit is 48 hours, again, going back to the point of putting a value on time. So I'm a typical consumer researching new vehicles that are interested in EVs, begin to gather information about the vehicle and the charging requirements. In the process to get a charger installed in your garage, you might start with a simple search for your city's name and something like EV charger installation. If your turns up with no results or comes back with what appears to be a very complicated process, are you likely to purchase an EV? Perhaps not. So governments are in a position to educate potential EV drivers and make the charging station installation process clear and more approachable. And the practice is to package up informational materials, provide all the guidance on permitting and inspection processes, specific residential, sort of in one package, multifamily, non-residential charging, and another. That first page of the document or website might be a simple outline of the process, specifying conditions under which a permit is required, permission requirements, the number and type of installations required, applicable codes, and other guidance. Santa County has an over-the-counter permit guidelines document shown here, which is available online. Different and inspection offices have different requirements for EV charging station projects. Require some or all of the following: usually a permit application, a plan for the installation, drawing, electrical load calculation, the manufacturer's installation guidance, that's the manufacturer of the EV charger itself, and of course the fee payment. So municipalities can consider ways to streamline the permitting for installations in single-family residences, such as eliminating site plan requirements. Commercial or public station side, those are often more complex, as we mentioned in reference to DC fast charge, but that also applies to level 2 side in those settings compared to residential installation. So that may require more significant back and forth between the installer and the permitting staff. show an example from the city of Milpitas. The website clearly separates residential and commercial installations, provides information about the required documentation, the fees, and the inspections. There's also very clear links directly to the application. In this city, the single-family homeowners are not required to submit site plans when applying for a permit. So that kind of goes back to the suggestion to look for ways to streamline. Locations help applicants determine if the existing electrical service panel is adequate or if an upgrade may be needed to install the EV charger. So it's a good idea to point to existing calculators and worksheets. All requirements should be called out in a checklist for the applicant, and the checklist can also be helpful for the permit reviewers to identify common corrections. The OPR website that I mentioned earlier provides several resources, including a load calculator for level 2 charging and an infrastructure permitting checklist. Both from the city of Campbell here in St. Clair County. It's a document that pulls together multiple relevant pieces, generally following those AB 1236 requirements. It includes the application checklist, and I've only showed the front page here, but if you follow the link, you can kind of see it's all packaged up. It includes information from the utility, PG&E in this case, and then load calculation worksheet and the inspection checklist. But staying within the process examples, a recommended recommendation here is with regard to training staff. The municipal permitting and inspection staff need to be sufficiently trained to handle EV charging station installation questions and requests. At a minimum, they should be familiar with the technology and equipment, some of the terminology, for example, that I mentioned earlier, as well as municipal requirements and others that apply. Staff be well-versed, ideally, in all of the information we've reviewed so far, the fees, the required documents, the checklists, and so on. This will help them do their jobs more efficiently and also ensure that staff are conveying accurate information to residents, their permitting applications, their applicants. It's worth reiterating the benefit of having guidance available online. That's a really simple step that can reduce the need for staff to spend time walking applicants through the process if they're able to kind of point to it online. That installations at single-family residents can be relatively simple and often don't require significant review by permitting staff. So in areas most processes are straightforward residential projects, the comprehensive training may not be necessary. However, installation of commercial and public stations or stations at multifamily dwellings are more complex and require more oversight and review. So until more of those projects are implemented, most jurisdictions and installers don't have extensive, if any, experience with these more complicated installations. Jurisdictions seeing or anticipating significant implementation of these types of projects may benefit the most from training. As a start, there are institutions that provide training specifically in EV charging station installations. One is called the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Training Program, EVITP, and develops course curriculum tailored for local government staff and stakeholders. Alternatively, if there are staff from your own city or neighboring jurisdictions that experience working on the projects, they may be willing to provide a peer-to-peer training or a workshop. Organizations like the Department of Energy's Clean Cities program have also produced a series of YouTube training videos to provide some background on the topic. We've mentioned quite a few practices that are inconsistent, including fees and the amount of time to issue a permit, the required documentation, for example. So each municipality should work with other local governments to make permitting and inspection procedures consistent between the jurisdictions using guidelines and other agreed upon standards. The typical residential installation involves three parties to simplify: the homeowner or EV driver, the installation contractor, and the electrical inspector. The inspector is there to protect the interests of the homeowner on behalf of the local government. Non-residential installations are more complex, but the installers and inspectors are still relied upon to ensure safety. The government can provide installation guidelines through the website or as part of the information mentioned earlier. Guidance should note that siting and design considerations differ depending on the type of installation and other factors. It's helpful to call out industry recommendations. So shown here is an example from San Jose showing preferred locations of the chargers. And you can see as close to the utility panel as possible. And the installation must be completed according to manufacturer specifications, and that's a pretty standard rule of thumb for the industry. The inspection process, one inspection should be sufficient for most single-family residential installations, and this helps to streamline the process, of course. An example from Santa Clara's own Sunnyvale, maybe on the line today, requires one inspection after new wiring and the charger unit is installed. The inspector must have access to the manufacturer's guidelines at the job site, which is shown here in the text box. For installations, recommendations is to consider allowing qualified electricians to inspect the systems themselves. The jurisdiction may require that electrician to complete a certain number of successful installations first, and then continue random inspections to ensure quality and safety. For family and commercial sites, additional approvals may be required. For example, a homeowners association may need to sign off on installations before chargers can be used. One of the primary causes for concern for EVs from the utility side is clustering of the load associated with EV charging. So you can imagine if a cul-de-sac, for example, everyone is a big EVs and purchased them and decided to charge all at once. There could be strain on that particular transformer. Utilities generally have transformer replacement programs. However, the adoption of EVs could occur faster in some areas, and the utility may not have comprehensive information to inform that replacement program. So utility notification protocols can help avoid transformer failures. Notification helps utilities minimize the potential grid impacts, like where the EVs are deployed and whether they're being charged using a level 1 charger or level 2 charger, for example. For commercial installations that require more extensive site work and possibly electrical service upgrades, for example, Tesla deploying their superchargers, there's less risk associated with utility notification because those entities are generally used to working with utilities and kind of work with them from day one. However, residential installations, that utility notification is problematic, and this is actually a gap that local government can help fill. Straightforward approaches are to use the permit application as a means to request permission to share basic information with the utility, kind of a opt-in, opt-out situation, or to make sure that all permit applicants have contact information for the utility, preferably a specific department or program, so that they can follow up directly. In most cases, the applicant will benefit from educational information from the utility, especially if they have discounted rates or other incentives. But regardless of the specific approach, local government should coordinate with the utility so that both parties have a better understanding of the impacts on the local distribution system. And we wanted to quickly mention metrics. The municipality should consider establishing some sort of performance metric specific to permitting. One idea is to track the time it takes to issue a permit for EV charging. Another is the average cost of the permit in those sort of categories that we mentioned, residential and non-residential. And electronic submissions, of course, will help enable better tracking in general. The EV charging industry is growing rapidly, changing every day, so whatever works well right now may not be the recommended approach several years from now. And for that reason, local government should incorporate the metrics into a back loop of some kind and regularly revisit the materials and processes to find ways to improve and it's to industry evolution over time. See here how the process is set at the principal level, it's put it in, and by collecting metrics, you can kind of understand what revisions may be needed to create that feedback loop. The key recommendations that we've presented here aim to make the EV charging station permitting process first and foremost streamlined yet safe, and that is to both the permitting and inspection side of things. making it accessible, the application itself, as well as accessible financially, making it transparent, specific, and predictable. There's a number of ways to do this. We talked about staff training, and that if it is a predictable thing, contractors applying for permits and others know exactly what's required and to deal with too much deviation from job to job. This is time for the residents applying for the permits, for the developers, and of course the staff on the municipal government side. And materials that specifically address EV charging can help with this as well. And harmonize to the extent possible, being in line with the jurisdictions in the area, and incorporating the state requirements that we mentioned, but also not recreating the wheel. There are plenty of existing templates and recommended documents to leverage. Finally, forward-looking, incorporating that utility notification to help head off any issues with utility capacity, and then periodically reviewing and updating the permitting process to ensure that it is in line with the industry and working well for the jurisdiction. So went through the information fairly quickly. Hopefully I didn't put any questions to the side from when we were talking, but happy to take any questions you all might have.
Getting anything over through the chat, Stacy. So I believe we are ready to vote. I don't think anyone else has questions.
Looks like that, Michelle.
No, I did not get one on my end. Did you? Okay.
Yeah. Someone just asked when the presentation will be sent out.
Be shooting for today. You'll get a follow-up email that will include the recording and the slides.
Just Louise, I just thought I would mention that also the county is working on a new website for the Driving to Net Zero project, where there'll be links to all the webinars, as well as all the kind of guidance documents that were created as part of this project, including different best practices and other things that Steve mentioned, in the beginning, toolkits and reference guides as well.
Well, all for attending, and you can look for a follow-up email shortly.
Thank you all.